So my topic today, why more hackers should build security products or security companies, product companies. Um, I'm told there's Q&A, but if not, you can tell me on at Haroon Meer on Twitter why I'm an idiot or why I'm missing the point. I know I'm the last speaker and holding everyone back from hitting the pub. So I promise I won't take too long. I want to start by saying sorry. I know everyone's tired of talks over Zoom. We get to have a 44Con in person, and I force you to do the talk over Zoom. I'm sorry. And the other thing I'm sorry about is if anyone's ever read any of our stuff or watched any of our talks, some of the stuff will be repetitive. And that's not just because we boring lazy people. It's because we believe in the stuff we say, and so you'll hear it time and again. But I'll just jump in. If you look at the topic, one of the questions has to be why. Like why bother with this talk? And like most things, there's multiple answers. Like Adrian mentioned, I was a pen tester forever, and we did lots of talks at places. And so in 2011, first 44Con, I do this talk on why I think pen testing is broken and needs to change. And that cost me about half of my friends in the industry. And then because we did lots of talks, we did a 44Con talk on why we were doing talks wrong. And so mainly my objective for this talk was to be as non-incendiary as possible and try not to lose the last few friends that I have. So the hope was that we could pick a topic that wasn't going to get the last 3 people to hate me. But in truth, for this talk, there's 3 large groups of reasons why I think more security folks, more of us, should build security products and security product companies. The first one is personal, and it sounds almost odd, but it's one of those things that you've got to allow old people their nostalgia. But I'll tell you, it is a super personal story. So we did a whole bunch of talks at Black Hat and DEF CON and stuff like that from like the early 2000s all the way through. And in 2007, a younger looking Marco Slaviero, who's there on my right, Marco and I did this talk called It's All About the Timing. And the whole talk was a whole bunch of timing attacks that we did against web applications. So remotely telling if users existed, data exfiltration via timing. There were a whole bunch of cute hacks in it. It's one of my favorite talks because one of the hacks was just the super visual hack where you attacking a server and you kind of build up the response string over time by HTTP timing. And a few years later, one of the things we realized is that at exactly the period that we were working on that talk and all of those hacks, in Cupertino, people were working on the iPhone. And without getting into the politics of Apple people or Android people and all of that, I think the iPhone changed history, right? Like I think it was a new computing platform, and I think the world is different after the iPhone. And as you get older, one of the things you start to worry about is, like, as pen testers and as offensive security people, you do this hard work, you do this clever work, you get your shot at dopamine, but the stuff seems so fleeting. Like even that talk, like we did so many cool and clever things, and for the most part, it starts to feel a little like you're always scribbling in the margins of other people's work. Like while we were doing that, people were putting in effort and they built the iPhone and they changed the world. And it occurred to me even later, someone asked me like, what were your regrets or what do you regret over the course of your life? And don't have many regrets. But one of them certainly is that when we were at SensePost, we didn't try hard enough to build a product. Like we tried, like most consulting companies, we had about 3 products that we tried. But like most consulting companies, you never separate things enough, and we never got them completely off the ground. Roelof then left and started Paterva. We left and started Thinkst. So the company had products in them, but we didn't do them while we were there. And one of my biggest regrets is that we didn't do that sooner. I wish that we did. And one of the other reasons why I think more of us should build security products is that there's just so many terrible products out there, right? Like if you look, there's a financial guys, Momentum Cyber, put out this map of products, and it's always mind-boggling to see how many products there are. And if you spend any time in offense, if you do pen testing or anything offense related, you know how few products are even speed bumps while you pillaging a network, right? There's bajillions invested, and there's all these products being built, and largely they don't even slow you down. And that's a sucky place to be. And in 2019, we gave a talk at VB in London called The Products We Deserve. And a bunch of smart people said that the talk didn't suck. So if you haven't seen it, you should go check it out. But the crux of the talk was the same, right? It said, look, we've got all these products. We do all these trade shows, but fundamentally, we're not making a dent in the problem. And our thesis at the time, we split it into 3 things. We said, look, we raise money badly, we build products badly, and we sell products badly. And the moment you talk about raising money badly, like everyone immediately blames VCs because they invest in exits, not companies. And the point we were making then was that we don't think it's just a VC problem. Like we think fundamentally, the way the money raise process works, the 2 big things that come out of it. One is VCs want to invest in complex stuff. And for lots of the problems that we have in security, more complexity is not going to help. And so if the products that get funded are the ones that are themselves more complex, it kind of explains why we end up in this horrible cycle. And the other thing that we raised is that one of the problems in InfoSec is that you use these, or people use these proxies for whether a product is good or not, because they can't fundamentally tell whether a security product is good or not. And because of that problem, it fundamentally breaks the VC model for security software. Super quickly, what we're saying is, if you have like some social media product, the typical way it works is you have a bunch of founders, VCs give them some money, they then see if they can get some users, the people with users get more money, and at some point, the person with the most users win, and people get rich, and VCs celebrate and post on Twitter about how they knew the great founders all along. Now, when it comes to security software, why this breaks is because you get all these founders and you get VCs who give them money, but fundamentally, companies can't tell whether that's a good product or not. And so companies look at these proxies that say, do they have a big security team, or do they have airport ads? And they get their customers based on those things that actually only exist because VCs gave them money. And VCs then see the customers and give them more money. And so you end up with lots of really bad products surviving for a long time in the marketplace, because the existence of the VC money makes the product look legit when actually it's not solving anything. And VCs don't want that either, right? You effectively making the cycle go on longer. And then fundamentally, we said, look, we build products badly. Since Bruce Schneier's early posts, we've been covering the fact that complexity can't be secured. But again, if you look at security products, there's tons of moving parts. There's kernel level stuff. It's horrible. In the talk, we go into more detail, and I won't do that. But suffice it to say, security software still fares poorly when it comes to just being secure software. And that doesn't change. And fundamentally, customers can't push back or don't push back. And largely, again, it's because there's an inability for customers to tell the difference. And the thing that got us a lot of both discussion and hate was we pointed out that the current way that security sales is done is terrible. Okay, so someone builds a mousetrap, they get VC money, and largely they told, hey, hire this bunch of sales folks, and you run through this process. And typically what happens is you end up with a whole bunch of spam, either calls or email or outbound sales. You get a whole bunch of airport ads that nobody understands. You get insane money spent at conference booths where you can watch magic shows or watch people do Rubik's Cubes. And then you get money thrown at two other sinister things. The one is the whole fake awards industry where everyone has an award for best security product in their niche. And the other one, which to me is just as terrible, but has a glossier veneer, is the analyst market, right? Where officially you don't pay analysts to give you good coverage, but unofficially you pay a lot of money to the analyst houses so that you can brief them regularly, and they happen to publish stuff that then gets your product bought. And largely what we were saying is, look, this is the way the stuff's been done historically. And we were saying in the past, like it didn't matter whether you had the better product or not, as long as you spent on big sales teams, as long as you spent on RSA, as long as it didn't matter if your product usability sucked, didn't matter if your product was insecure, you'd have a sales team that was going out hitting the streets, and your product would largely still win. And what we were saying is that we were seeing signs that that stuff was dying. And one of the things that we talk about as a company is that we've done none of that stuff and seem to be doing reasonably well in the marketplace. And one of the interesting things when we did that talk is a lot of people thought that the talk was negative. And what's interesting is I largely saw the talk as a hopeful one. Because for the most part, our pitch was, listen, that's how it used to be. But increasingly, we're seeing security companies founded by ex-hackers or current hackers, people who cared about the product that was still breaking through. And like, we are a pretty small company based fundamentally in South Africa. And in 2021, we did this blog post when we cleared 11 million in ARR. And even if it's not just in terms of money, like at this point, the products that we build are installed on all 7 continents. So like we've got canaries in Antarctica with the penguins. And I don't say this stuff boastfully, because like with all the stuff, I'm super aware that like while you're winning, people think you're smart, and at some point you lose and you're the dumbass. And I've got no illusions about the fact that like lots of that stuff is down to luck. But the thing that's important to us is to say there is a different way to do things. And doing things the old way so clearly wasn't working, that there's a new way that's entirely possible and gives us hope for the future. And we didn't invent the stuff, right? We were largely fortunate because we were beneficiaries of a certain time. And 15 years ago, if you built a product company, everyone would tell you, like, it doesn't matter how good your product is. Like there's startup books that are built with the knowledge that says a good product with bad distribution will always lose to a bad product with good distribution. And they'll cite all these examples of where good products fail because they didn't do all those things. And then in the last few years, you've started to see the rise of what the VC startup world calls PLG, right? Product-led growth. And you get companies like Slack and GitHub and Dropbox that end up with hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue without initially having outbound sales teams. Okay, and that's the stuff that perfectly works for us. And it's a combination of things, right? The internet gives you distribution. You've got ways to reach an audience. Engineers are more empowered at organizations, so they're able to swipe a credit card and buy you in. All of those things mean that the old rules no longer apply. Like, you can build a company and win just because you've got a better product. Like, it's not impossible anymore. And in the 2000s, early 2000s, Kevin Kelly wrote this post called 1000 True Fans. And he was talking about how if you were an artist or a creator, you didn't need 1 million people to love you. You just needed 1,000 people who'd pay for what you do. And one of the things that I'm hoping more people take away is how gettable that stuff is. Like it seems crazy when you think that you and 3 friends or you and 3 other engineers can build a product that can survive and become a company. But if you think that you just need 1,000 customers, like it suddenly starts to be a lot more tractable. And when you think about this, there's always scary unknowns, right? Because like there's this whole running a company thing, and there's tax, and there's sales, and there's parts of the thing that you just don't know about. But again, the stuff's so much better these days. Like just the contribution that Y Combinator has made, other than giving us endless joy reading Hacker News, Y Combinator started the process of switching that asymmetry around so that there was more information for founders than there used to be. There's very little that you need to do today in terms of running a tech company that hasn't been written about, that hasn't been blogged, that doesn't exist somewhere where you can pull it off a blog or a book. I know lots of the current startups, security startups, all follow SaaStr. And if you haven't seen it, you should check it. Like Jason Lemkin gives tremendously good advice. And again, nobody's advice matches 100% to your situation, but there's not that many unknowns anymore. Like everything's pretty find-outable. And one of the things that's been consistently true is that founders typically are quite aware of how lonely founding a company can be. And so you see lots of these communities like private Slacks or Discords where founders, tech founders, security founders will all get together and happily share information. So it's just shouldn't be that scary anymore. There's lots of people willing to help if you take your first steps. And so the question should be, well, why do I think you should be a founder, like start a security product company? Like, why us? And I think that as security people, as hackers, there are certain benefits that we have, stuff that works naturally for us, and some strong reasons why we should do this. The first reason why I think we should do this is to avoid a type of adverse selection. Like if the only people starting the company like MBAs who just want to get rich off the hot new sector, then those are the companies that we're going to end up with. And instead, if the people who actually care about solving the problem start building these companies, we're going to start to see those sorts of companies in the marketplace. The second reason I want to give is totally hand-wavy, but it's something I genuinely believe. For many years, people have argued that if you want to be a good attacker, you should spend some time on the blue team. And if you want to be a good blue teamer, you should spend some time as an attacker. And it's funny to believe that stuff might have been controversial at some point, but it used to be like people used to question that logic. And I almost want to throw in a third variation of it. And that says you can't be a good security person unless you understand some part of the business. And one of the ways that you can understand a business is by running a business. And in the early days, it used to be completely foreign to say to defenders they should learn how to attack. Like when Satan was released, people hated it. Like it had to be renamed to Santa, for those of you old enough to remember it. But I think in the same way, security people sometimes go wrong when we think in absolutes and don't think about trade-offs that the business actually has to make. And one of the things that will happen running your own business is you become acutely aware of those trade-offs. Like as a consultant, of course, everyone should do a pen test every year, blah, blah, blah. And when it's just you and your two engineer partners, you start to consider, like, is there value in that? Like, we also going to lose time doing the stuff. Like, is there value in this stuff? And you start to look at things differently. And I think it's actually useful for us. And if you think that your life as a security person is just telling everyone what can't be done constantly, you're not going to be a very popular security person, and you also will make bad trade-offs, right? And what you end up doing, if you are good at the job, is you end up choosing which fights need fighting. And one of the things that people don't tell you when you're building a company is that that's possibly the number one skill that you're going to have to work on. Everyone can do everything. Like, you can hire people to solve any of the problems in your business. The question is, which problems will kill you unless you solve them now? And it's something that good security people have to figure out. It's something that you're going to have to figure out as a founder. And I think enough time doing the one gives you preparation for the other. Another reason why I think it's well suited to us. So this line is stolen from Doug Song and John Oberheid, who built Duo. And Duo was the darling of the security industry. They sold for a few billion to Cisco. But one of their core company principles was that you should engineer the organization. And they spoke about it all the time, that there were lots of things that before Duo, people thought had to scale up with people. And Duo looked at it and said, we can engineer around this. We can build solutions around this. And more, as you see technical founders lead companies, you see this logic coming through, which is why you see the founders of WhatsApp ending up building infrastructure that maintains hundreds of millions of simultaneous conversations with 50 engineers. All of that stuff's waiting to be engineered. And for us, like at Canary, one of the things we often talk about is that even running a business is just a series of hacks. And I don't mean this in the horrible way that people have abused, like growth hacking or that sort of, like, we're not talking about social engineering your users to pay more for your product. But what I mean is almost everything is just about, well, here's the game, here's the rules. How do we get the solution we want following these rules? And in some ways, it becomes a fun game to hack. Like it becomes super interesting and worth doing. And one of the things that we realized early on, so we do a company, for those of you who don't know, like Canary builds products to allow people to detect breaches on their network. And when we started, there were a bunch of other companies that took VC funding for between like $30 and $60 million, and we didn't. And we were slightly worried about them because one of the things people tell you is like they can pay PR agencies or they can pay for all this PR. And one of the things you notice very quickly is that they have all that money and they can spend it on all this PR, but they don't fundamentally have anything interesting to say. Like you can't pay people out of the industry to write useful content for in the industry. And instead, Halvar Flake was talking about his previous company at some point. And he mentioned how early on they were idea rich but cash poor. And if you've spent time in security, you'll know the feeling. There's a basquillion things you want to play with, a basquillion things you can talk about. And even really well-funded companies can't keep up with that. And you can totally use it to your advantage, right? You can put out stuff and A, help the community, and B, get attention for your products. I want to talk about unusual hot takes on this company building thing. And by that, mainly, I mean, there's some stuff that nobody told us that's kind of non-intuitive, or certainly was non-intuitive to us when we started building the company. And one of the things is that despite the fact that people think the tech industry is this super cutting edge, try new things industry, in some ways, they have really stayed thinking. Like everyone's pretty convinced they know how sales should be done until a Slack and a GitHub come along and change everything. And everyone's completely convinced that you should make your onboarding human-free, because if you have humans in the mix, it becomes a problem, until Superhuman comes along and does an in-person onboarding for every customer, and suddenly everyone likes it. And mainly my take there is that all of the stuff is up for grabs. Like as vague as it sounds, I'm mainly saying there really are no sacred cows with the stuff. Like, you really should be able to say, this makes sense to me. I don't see why we need to do this. Let's try it another way. And you can. Like, that's part of the joy of having your own company. And as long as you have good thinking and you're honest enough with your thinking so that you can take a different fork in the road, it should work. And the second thing is that the bar is so crazy low. And I don't just mean with security products, I even mean with tech products. When we started with Canary and there were all these other companies, like, we kind of put our heads down, and initially we just wanted 10 customers, right? There were 4 of us, we were building Canary, and if we got 10 people to pay us, like, we thought that was amazing. And after 10, it was like, okay, like, can we get 100? And can we not lose these people? Like, can we not have them think we are idiots? They paid us money. Like, can we show them we're worth it? And like 100 becomes 200, becomes 500. And before you know it, like, you've got 1,000 customers. And at some point, we started getting lots of VC interest. We didn't need money because we charged what we thought was a fair price. So we were profitable. And then we started to hear about these other funded companies. And it turns out that, like, 4 years in, none of them had 600 customers. Like we ended up having more customers than all of them put together. And honestly, I don't think that we were particularly great. Like the bar is just really low. Like if you can get 1,000 customers, even by funded Silicon Valley terms, you're way ahead of the pack. And again, you think that it's a really big ask because you're thinking about 1 million customers or a bajillion customers, or how will this work? And actually, if you can get 1,000 customers paying you and renewing every year, like, VCs will drool over you, and you've got a shot at building a huge, meaningful company. So yeah, you shouldn't be intimidated because the bar is really shockingly low. And one of the things, and this normally is a result of VCs showering companies with cash, is you get lots of people who over-index on massive team sizes. We had Salinas at some point with an ex-Gartner analyst who said something on LinkedIn about companies' success being tied to the size of their team. And it's insane, right? Like, it's the easiest metric to gain, like, just hire more people. Like, it's about as stupid as companies that claim victory for funding rounds. Like literally, you've just given away more of your company. Woohoo! Like it's a stupid thing to be celebrating. If you follow Paul Graham, or if you read his stuff, you'll see he talks about insightfully that in their early days, companies should do things that don't scale. And mainly the reason for this, and we found this to be true, is that most young startups horribly pre-optimize. So they do stuff and then they go, but how will we do this at scale? And then most people die long before they get to 10,000 customers, like they die at 50. And so all that pre-optimization is pointless. Like in the early days, get stuff, get it out there. It doesn't matter if it won't scale. You'll figure that stuff out. Number of customers, like I said, it's almost crazy to me to see how many startups there are out there with literally tens of millions, so like 50, 60 million worth of funding that don't yet have 1,000 customers. Like you could take that $60 million and pay everyone, and they'd be your customers, and you'd have a better shot at building a business. And it's going to sound ridiculously trite, but one of the things that lots of startups forget is just to not suck. And this sounds like a stupid thing to say, but you'll see that when people start building a product business, and at this point, I'll talk just about security products. Walk the floor at RSA, right? And you'll see these huge booths, and you can do the sums, right? You can see what they paid for that booth. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's huge swag on offer, and there's huge display, and there's a party tonight, and there's all of this peripheral stuff. And anyone you talk to on the floor will tell you that the product doesn't work. And there's lots of reasons for it, but fundamentally, you see this thing where founders start a company and then get very distracted by all of the stuff around the product, like the hiring and the where we've got offices and the do we have enough air-ons and do we have the best swag? Do we have the parties? Do we have all the conferences? Like fundamentally, if someone's going to pay you for a product, if you can just not suck for that person who gave you their money, then you're going to be doing better than most of the people out there. And you've got a shot at building a sustainable thing. And fundamentally, like if there was one takeaway for us from the Products We Deserve talk, we were trying to get people to see that we believe we're entering a new time when you can win with the better product, that the product matters. And something that I became aware of that I genuinely love is that like you get founders and you get companies where the founders obsessed with their product. And Doug Song often talks about like how many company CEOs can demo the company's product. Not kind of maybe, like knows deeply the features they on, cares about it. And he says you can see the products that company makes versus another. And again, it becomes one of those times where people will look at your company and say like, no, but you can do that when you're a small company. You're not going to be able to do that as you grow. And it's why I'm so grateful for the Apple example, right? Because like for all the silliness around it, like you know that Steve Jobs and his lieutenants deeply cared about the products they made. And they were $1 trillion company, right? So nobody gets to say that only works when you're a small startup with 15 million in ARR. That stuff's sustainable. It's just the choices that you end up making. And fundamentally, deeply, we believe that hackers can build companies because these days better products can win. And if I'm here on the screen telling you that you should build products, and one of the things you say is, but like there's this other stuff that I always kind of dislike. Like I always find a little bit distasteful. Let's hit some of that. Like typically the three things that technical people rail against or have a problem with is marketing, sales, and money stuff. And I'll hit it quickly. Like if we're talking about marketing, like I'm not going to hit it. I think almost every time I've ever done a keynote, I've quoted Richard Hamming and his magnificent You and Your Research paper. And if you haven't read You and Your Research, at least take that away from this talk and you would have won. Go read You and Your Research. It's life-changing if you read it every year. And Hamming in You and Your Research talks about, and at this point, he was just talking about scientists, right? And he says, fundamentally, if you're a scientist, you've got to learn to sell your stuff. You can't just do your stuff in the corner. You've got to do stuff and do it in a way that you can make people say, yep, that stuff's good. And again, Jobs, and at this point, I'm sounding like an acolyte. Jobs says, like, the best marketing is just telling the truth. Now, I actually got this quote from Tony Fadell's book, Build, which is the second recommendation. If you're a technical founder and you want to build things, go get Tony Fadell's book. So Tony Fadell is the guy who built the iPod and then built Nest. And he's got this book called Build, which is a really good description how to be a technical founder. And he talks about like Nest's investment in marketing and Apple's investment in marketing, and says fundamentally what you want is for your marketing to be the truth. And aside from the eye roll that I'm sure some people have, like fundamentally for us, what it's meant is there's stuff we want to say about Canary. And for me to be able to say it, some things have to be true. And so we now have to do those things. And so it's not just that you choose the marketing that sells your stuff. It's you choose what you want to be able to say, and then you make the stuff so that you're able to say that stuff. And so you can use your marketing to keep your product in line. And the result is perfectly good for everyone. And even just in terms of sales, I was going to point out that sales doesn't have to be what you think sales is. Like as a company, we cleared 11 million with just one salesperson. And like our one salesperson then was Bradley, who was at 44Con until yesterday. And Bradley was our head of pen testing at SensePost. So certainly not a slick salesperson. And all of our sales is inside sales. So it's not us doing cold calling. And that stuff's completely doable. But if your take is that you don't like it, one of the things that's interesting is that sales is a way to get a really honest, tight feedback loop. So Jason Fried from 37 Signals, someone asked him about like, should you do a free product or should you do a paid product? And at the time, he wrote something about how like people want to be nice to you. So if you make, hey, here's my super log parser that uses PCAPs or uses BPF and can draw you pretty graphs, like, what do you think of this? Everyone who sees it sees that you put work into it and goes, man, that's great. And you can totally fool yourself by thinking you've built the best thing in the world if that's all you do. And Jason Fried's point is, ask someone to pay you $20 for it. He says, and the act of someone going into their pocket and paying you and someone renewing next year and saying, this is still worth it to me, it's a super valuable feedback loop. And I've given a talk before where I point out that like the biggest difference between attackers and defenders, why attackers largely win is because they have better feedback loops. As an attacker, you try your attack, it fails, you know it failed. as a defender, you often don't have that feedback. And that largely gives you the different results that you see between attack and defense. So if you've got one that puts feedback on the stuff you're building, sales isn't that bad. Money stuff, again, I'm going to cheat and use quotes from people I like. Tim O'Reilly, if you're old, like Adrian and I or other people in the audience, you cut your teeth on the O'Reilly animal books. Tim O'Reilly's really got some great original thinking. And he had this phrase when he used to even talk about Google, where he used to say that it's perfectly okay to make billions. He says, just try to make sure that you create more value than you capture. There's nothing wrong with making money. Just make sure that you're not taking every dollar off the table. And I can tell you, like, we're not Basquillionaires or driving Lambos. We don't invest in Bitcoin. But as a company, there's a huge bunch of benefits to getting stuff right? Like internally, we get to grow people and we get smarter people. But even externally, like as a company, we get to be sponsors for Usenix. We get to sponsor a whole bunch of open source products. We in South Africa, so we get to pay for a whole bunch of bursaries for kids. When we did that blog post, I think we that year gave like $1 million in charity, and all of that stuff becomes possible when as a company you're making money. And yeah, it's completely useful and completely worth doing, and not as distasteful as most people think. With all of this positive stuff, there are some bits that suck, and there are some bits that are hard. And one of the things that I often say is that one of the things that will stop lots of security folks from going into product companies or building products is that when you're a consultant, when you're a red teamer, when you're a pen tester, you almost always get to be the smart person in the room. Nobody can argue with you when you've got their mail spools or when you on their server. And when you build a product, there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and you've got to suck it up. Like sometimes you've got to suck it up for a long time before people figure out that your product's any good. And that bump is harder than most people think, because you go from being really smart or thinking you're really smart to kind of having random people tell you why you're an idiot for making the button blue when it should have been red. The other thing that'll slow you down is that security pays a lot. And it means that if you want to build a product, your opportunity cost is high. Like you could be making more doing offense stuff or doing consulting stuff. But of course, if you get it right, those curves cross at some point, and product businesses can do just as well. Criticism is really easy. At a previous 44Con, I played the Anton Ego speech about why the new needs friends. And I still believe it's true. Criticism can be right, but when you're building stuff is also really harsh. And along the way, you've got to figure out how to not let it hurt your heart anytime you get negative feedback. And if you find out how to do that, then DM me, because it still hurts my heart anytime someone says something bad about us. And in truth, like building a product business never gets much easier. Like if you're lucky, you get different challenges. Someone told me it's like doing CrossFit. Like it doesn't suddenly happen that now you're good and so CrossFit doesn't hurt anymore. It always hurts. It just hurts while you're able to do more things. So it's always hard. But I suspect most of us have kind of signed up for a Sisyphusian task anyway. Like it's what we do. We might as well do one where we also win. For those of you who hope that you can build a tech product to get away from people, it's still about people. Like you have teams building software. The software doesn't build itself. But if you're lucky, you get a chance to make a real impact. You get to work with amazing people. You get a chance to keep trying bigger things. Like one of the things that's really cool about building a business like this is along the way, you get to, like you always had an idea that you'd run a company a certain way. You'd give certain benefits, or you'd allocate time this way. And as you win, you start to get to try more and more of those things. Well, what happens if we do this? What happens if we handle sales this way? And it's a crazy blessing to be able to get a chance to actually try it. And for me, like one of the big things, because like I said, I had the bugbear about the iPhone being built. You get to build something, and like there's a crazy joy just in that. Like waking up and finding out that people in Antarctica use your stuff, or people in China use your stuff. It's crazy cool. And then hearing stories about where stuff that you built or stuff that you worked on has actually helped people or saved things. It's pretty hard to beat the feeling. And for the most part, lots of us have worked at sucky companies or know people who work at sucky companies. And if you do the stuff, you get to be the change. Like you get to be the company that doesn't suck and hopefully does that stuff right. So yeah, for the most part, I think more hackers should do it. And if you ever decide to do it and need someone to talk to, DM me on Twitter or drop me a note. But other than that, thanks so much for your time. I'll stop there for questions.
Thank you for your talk. What would be your advice from scaling from 10 to 50 or from 50 to 100?
Are you talking about income, like revenue?
No, customers.
Oh, so I can tell you what we did, and it's really as trite as it sounds, is we had a really small burn rate because there were just a small group of us. And so we worked really hard. And I'm not even making this up because this sounds more fantastic in retrospect. Like when we first sold, we were so amazed that anyone would give us $10,000. We just wanted to make sure we didn't drop the ball. And early on, you will drop the ball because your product's not robust yet, right? And so we worked hard to make them happy. And those customers, we managed to choose just the right features and keep them happy enough so that they told other people. And literally for us, it was initially just word of mouth. And so one of the things we did that is slightly, I'll tell you two things that are slightly unfair. One is we had a bit of a reputation starting off, right? People knew us. And if we said, hey, try this, it doesn't suck, some people were likely to try it. And then from there, we just had to be able to say, hey, listen, try this. Those people tried it and they said it didn't suck. And like I said about marketing, along the way, that has to be true. Those people have to say you don't suck. And if you suck, you need to go and fix that. And then along the way, we had like nice incidents where suddenly Ryan Huber, who was a security engineer at Slack, tweeted, hey, there's 3 products he swears by, Duo Security, YubiKey, and Things Canary. And a whole bunch of people came through after that saying, hey, if Slack are saying this, there must be something cool. And so after that, we'd say to people, hey, try us. We only 10K and Slack say we don't suck. And mainly our focus was, let's make sure we don't let down the people who use us. And those numbers climb really quickly if you've got the right product. And if you've got the wrong product, go fix your product. And that's why I say we really are entering a time where if your product's good enough, it can stand and it'll grow. I genuinely, deeply believe it.
Any more? No, I'm not running.
That's a little bit slow, that one, wasn't it? How did you know when you got product market fit with what you're building and which features to prioritize?
Yeah. So how do you know when you've got product market fit? How do you choose which features to prioritize? I think there's two. I'd like to give two answers on it. The one is that's the game, right? Like you've got to choose, and at any given time, there's lots of people who have lots of opinions on what it is, and you've got to choose. You've got to have some conviction over what you think is enough. And if we get into the weeds for a little bit, when we build Canary, it gets to act like other operating systems. And version 1 that we shipped could just act as 3 operatings. It could act as a Linux box, a Windows box, or a switch, a Dell switch. And that's a really small number. Like today, it can do SCADA equipment and it can do thousands of permutations. But at the time, we believed 3 personalities were enough. And we couldn't do more. Like we didn't have the bandwidth to do more at the time. And we just had to find enough of those customers who saw it and went, a fake Windows server would be perfect for us. And there's this combination of you've got to make your choices, and then you've also got to pay attention to see whether it lands in the market. And if it doesn't, either you hold on to your conviction or you adjust course along the way. But there's no recipe for that other than you work crazy hard and then you listen to see where it goes. And I've got a blog post up on our blog, again, just to cement my relationship as a devotee of Steve Jobs. He gives an interview at the D8 conference at some point. And they laughed at him about the choice that he made. I think the choice was to kill Flash. And he said at some point, in a very human moment, he says something like, listen, we've just got humans working at this company. And we come in every day and we try to make the choices we think the market wants. And he says, look, it's really easy to not make the choices. He says, but we'll always make those choices. Like we think this is, and he says, and sometimes we'll get that wrong. And when we get it wrong, we'll adjust course and make it better. And that's why, like the reason I'm such an Apple fan and the reason the quotes come up so often is because I think if your company has that baked into its bones, where right at the top, engineers, support, everyone rallies around the same flag, which says, we're trying to make the best decisions we can so that this product earns the money this customer pays us for. Along the way, you'll get stuff wrong and you'll panel beat it and get closer. But it's almost crazy how few companies do that. And if you're a user of security products right now, you'll know how many products you use that almost unfathomably don't seem to care about whether it works, whether it's usable. They're still doing the airport ads. They're still doing the big boots. And it's like, come on, man, like build your Mac version so that it doesn't suck. Or like try. And I know it's a hard problem, but it's not your marketing budget hard problem. Like go solve the product. And you can win. And it's great for us as technical founders because it means there's this niche that you can drive through if you can get your company to care enough about your product. Sorry, that's a long answer to a small question.
I was particularly impressed at how long that answer was, Haroon. So we had three hands. We had three hands come up while you were talking. We may not get to all three because the closing soon. But first,
I have a quick question on balancing between building the new features, meaning putting money into that, and spending on sales and marketing. I think, especially when you talk about this, and you talk about building a good product, there is a struggle between spending on potential growth and building on anchoring your product more. How do you make these decisions, if you can share a bit more?
For us, it's been really easily. We spend very little on sales and marketing throughout. And pretty consistently, we've been of the belief that if the product sucks, the marketing and sales, you don't want it. Like, people are going to buy it and not renew. People are going to buy it and say bad things about you. So for us, table stakes is that the product has to win. And in terms of the rest of the stuff, like I say, as young technical companies, you idea rich and cash poor. And so for advertising, we've deliberately went for be so good that people will say nice things about you. Like make sure you win for customers. It's what we've done to date. So we've, if you go to our blog, we've documented in detail, like when we do an RSA, what it costs us. At this point, like, the company has money, so we spend some money on podcast advertising, but fundamentally, we still don't do any outbound sales. All our sales are inbound. And the idea is not completely foreign. There's a book by the co-founder of Square, and he talks about how in their early days, they didn't have people to do phone support. And so instead, they had to build a product to not need support. And in many ways, we think options like that exist that say, well, we don't have a big team that can explain this product if we make it complex. So we've got to make it simple. And simple doesn't mean easy. It just means that you can't rely on a team of consultants to sell it. That's been our thing so far, and that's what's worked for us. Different strokes, your mileage might vary.
Hey, thanks. That was a great talk. So you answered an earlier question about scaling sales. But, you know, the security customer is perhaps slightly risk adverse, doesn't want to try that product nobody else is using. How did you actually close your first sale? How did you get out into the market?
Yeah, it's a super good question. So in truth, the first few sales that we made surprised us because, so I lie. So when we built version 1, we sent version 1 to 12 people we knew from our consulting backgrounds and said to them, if we made this, would you buy it? Interestingly, when we told them about it before sending it to them, most of them said no. And that's one of those times where you had to have conviction. So we sent it to some people, some of them friends of ours, and we said, listen, if we made this for $5,000, would you buy it? And most of the smart technical people came back with, I can do this myself. I don't need to pay you $5,000. And at that point, we were convinced they didn't know yet. And so we built those 12 and we sent it to them. And after playing with it, 11 of the 12 said, yes, we'd buy it. And so we made some sales from them. And then we spoke about it. We were lucky that Ars Technica covered it. And we pitched a whole bunch of reporters saying, hey, here's a cool thing. And almost everyone dissed us, except for Ars, who ran an article, and Patrick, Risky Business, spoke about us. And we started, we got, like, in that first month, like under 10 sales. And in truth, for a while you worry about, are the people who bought just buying because they like us? And then you start to get customers who completely don't know you. And then you go, yes, they bought, but will they renew? And then you get, and I think some of that tension is important because it stops you from sitting on your laurels and starting to suck. And I think constantly worrying about whether you're adding enough value is useful. It ends up with a good product or better product and it's better for people. But again, that stuff was surprisingly day by day, and it worked.
Excellent. So thank you, Haroon. Adrian is on the stage in front of you now, so I think we're going to move into our close, but let me also repeat what one of your questioners said. That was an excellent talk, so thank you very much.
Thanks so much, folks.